Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Ether Amara. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a third part for my topic series that I had started here in regards to toxic girlhood, being a girl mom, understanding a lot of the detriments that we have as Black moms with raising our daughters, how hard it is to really assert a sense of comfort when it comes to our daughters and making friends, having friendships in school, being in public places, and overall creating a psychologically safe foundation for Black children. So in this video today, as you can see in the title, this video is going to discuss a couple of different things that I feel are really important to really focus on and understand, especially living in the times that we are today in a very digital world, in a very, kind of widespread and open, non-filtered kind of racism that is spewing through our children's everyday life, everyday learning. And it is really creating a mental disparity. And I just want to talk about how I combat those things being a single mom, what I do to help my daughter understand friendships and how to cultivate healthy friendships as children and things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So this video is going to be called The System of the Switch. Now, what that means to me and how I'm using it in the context of which it'll be used here, when it comes to raising a child and understanding a child's brain and how detrimental it is to their mental health when they are being jarred in multiple directions at a very young age, I believe that this type of behavior creates a switch system inside of a child that is really detrimental to their livelihood. And it's also a detriment, to the victims who end up falling under that kind of system of control that these children have been taught from their parents and from society and from the images that they are being fed in their lives. So this is very much created under the understanding of children who are outside of the diaspora, who are, non-Black, who fall into other categories, and who are being fueled with this hatred towards Black children that they have to try to create this understanding for themselves of when do I turn this switch of the system on, when is the switch off, and then for our children understanding when do we know when this switch is on and when do we know when it's off. So I just wanted to understand, how that plays into how I raise my daughter, how I try to get her to understand red flags and what those things mean. So I'm just going to, kind of go into that. So, even from my own personal experiences, just seeing how social media has portrayed Black girls in a very, you know, discussing light, I think it's really important for us as moms to really train our daughters with the understanding of self-worth. Like I said, I do a lot of, doll theory here. I do a lot of self-actualization practices where I'll have my daughter draw pictures of herself. And I will have her say, okay, who do you see yourself as? What do you see yourself as? Do you see yourself as beautiful? Do you love, the skin that you're in? Do you understand who you are as far as your race goes and your nationality? What are things that, are indicative to her to understand her differences from others in her spaces? So I think it's really important for us to really be able to be comfortable in using play as therapy. As I stated before, doll theory is a very helpful way for a child to understand. And it could also be harmful if used in the wrong way, but it can be really helpful to get them to understand themselves, accepting themselves for who they are. Seeing who you are in a good light is very important for a child. And I feel like also, kind of piggybacking off of that, a lot of the negative things that we have going on with these Natasha dolls and the inappropriate portrayals of blackness and beauty and provocativeness, the pervasiveness. I think there's a lot that we have to get our children to take down in order to understand that these things are not indicative of you. This is not who you are. This is not what you are, to be treated like. This isn't who you are said to be, so on and so forth. So I feel like there's a lot of work that we have to do, a lot more than other parents, in order to really protect our children, because it's not just only going to come from, one side of the race scale. You're going to get it from all sides of the race scale. Anyone who is outside of yourself, and even inside our own diasporas, we have our own diaspora wars that we have to deal with our children, dealing with being light skinned and not being considered black enough, and being darker skinned and not being treated as a human, or just the standard of beauty with if you are a lighter skinned woman, and the assumption that you are thinking that you're better than your more melanated brothers and sisters, or just kind of the plethora of issues that we have to really try to break down and put onto the plate for our children to understand. I think that it is really difficult when you're sending your child to school and they have to try to determine, when is the switch on? When is it dangerous for me to be connecting with other children who are outside of my race? When is it safe for me to be communicating with someone, or even, going over to another child's home and being in the home with other children where there are not other Black children? And it becomes a conflict of interest when trying to understand, is this a safe situation? Is this, something that is trying to be used as, something fun that they think that they can do to your child to disparage them in secrecy? How do we get our children to understand those things? I think that it's really difficult to sit with my child and explain these things, but I've been able to manage my way through it and getting her to see, okay, the first signs that we see when it comes to, specifically in girl groups, because girls are very much, as I've stated before, very susceptible to the ways of women. Being that a woman is the mothering, aspect of our society, the nurturer, the matriarch, the one that girls are going to innately follow. I feel like the reason that I am, so focused on toxic girlhood and the influences of women is because we are the ones that hold that maternal link that girls will go with regardless of who you are. And that is just a natural way of life, being that a woman is the mother. So I feel like it's very important for women to be able to see how they have created their daughters to treat other girls, and how that perpetuates into their adult lives when they get into spaces like the medical field, and we see the maternal mortality rates rising, and we see women who are careless with how they treat Black women. We see the deaths of infants in hospitals, and so on and so forth. And when I'm looking at this, I'm trying to figure out how we can create a sense of understanding with our children when these children have been raised with a system where we don't know when the switch is on and off. And I think that it's really important to really start explaining it to them in layman's terms. If someone makes statements, for example, statements about your hair, that's always like the first telltale sign that someone has some kind of competing factor that they may be stepping into, or kind of disparaging the way that you dress, or making remarks about ashiness or the upkeep of your hair. I'm always telling my daughter, your friends who love you and who care about you are not going to make comments like that. So I think it ultimately becomes a waiting game. You have to wait and see when that person is going to, make their move, unfortunately. But I think that when we teach our children that those are things that we cannot waver on when it comes to our own dignity and our self-respect, I think that kind of gives them the opportunity to think for themselves and say, okay, this person is saying something that is hurting my feelings, or this person is, not listening to my boundaries. I know that this is not my friend and I'm going to stay away from this person. I think teaching young people how to, deliberate about how someone makes them feel is it's so important. And like I said, with the way that social media is, with disparaging, our children over their looks and over their hair, we have a really hard job to, teach our children, beyond self-love. It's how can I keep myself safe? I begin to feel like we are just being, caged in. We're being backed into a corner with the way that they are treating us and our children. We have like I said, the highest rate of infant mortality rate. Our children are being murdered. Our children are, going missing at a high rate. Black girls are at the head of, this um, disparaging, online issue of being lured offline and falling into these groups of people who do not have good intentions for our children. And I feel like it's really important to speak up and get other parents to wake up and see. You've got to make sure you know what your parents, or what you as a parent have to know what your children are doing online. You have to make sure you know that they're not talking to people in, online spaces and thinking that these people, are for them, or have, marketed themselves and used the verbiage to, lure you in and make you think that they're your friend, or that you can be comfortable with them. Have to be careful. There are just so many Black girls who are falling for this, and I feel like it is definitely due to that lack of psychological safety being taught in the home from mom. I feel like, yeah, dads are important. Dads have a really, huge part in raising children, but mothers have a really big, responsibility to protect our children from any and everything at all costs. And I feel like the lack of that protection from the feminine world is the reason why our children are just going astray. And I am really very much an advocate for trying to create a community or a communal space where Black moms can communicate with each other and figure out how do we keep our children safe, especially being single moms. We definitely have a double-edged sword when we're single moms and we are vulnerable. We don't have a lot of supports around us, and we kind of fall into, having to trust other people, and those people that we end up putting our trust in will betray our trust. And we have to figure out, how do we navigate through that to keep our children safe? So I will definitely be, bringing up different subtopics here when it comes to that toxic feminine, because I feel like women play a huge role in this. We can't remove women from these issues that we have going on in our society, because mom is the one that is the nurturer, the provider, the one who brings the child into the, into this world, and is supposed to lay the foundation of who our children are supposed to be. And if you are teaching your children, as a boy mom, or, as a girl mom, if you're teaching your children to be evil, nasty, and disgusting to other, innocent Black children, it's definitely feeding that market of individuals, adults who are out here who are looking to harm our children. And I think that it's very unfair to sit here and, you know, um, not look at how much of a detriment that is for our children, and making sure that, we solidify that belief in our children that, I know you want to play with other kids outside of, who you are, but you just really have to be careful, because you don't know what their intentions are. You don't know what that system of control looks like in that household. You don't know when the switch is on or when the switch is off. So I feel like trying to teach your child that, it's definitely really difficult, without them thinking that you yourself are approaching it from a, from a biased standpoint, when it's just, I want you to be safe. I don't want you to befriend people who do not have your best interests. I don't want you to be shamed, in an environment where people have not been taught to have respect for you. So I feel like it is something that is really important for mothers to really look into and understand. If we believe in femininity and feminine equality and feminine rights, there can't be any taking Black women's femininity and our feminine rights off of the table when it comes to us being mothers, because we are just as much of mothers as anyone else here on this planet, and we are the ones who are being dealt the worst hand in society altogether. And I feel like it is very important for our society to begin to look at that and look at the numbers and see how detrimental this is, and how we need to bridge this gap of control and understanding these systems to keep our children safe, so that we don't have to worry about, you know, our children going to school and being bullied by both teachers and being bullied by students. I feel like that is the worst situation for our children to be put into. And then to have to pull them out of school and do homeschool and, you know, kind of falter and lack in that socialization field is, you know, it's hard to do to them. But in order for them to be safe, if that's what it costs for their safety, I would rather them be safe than to, you know, only have that socialization practice when it comes to school. Because I mean, obviously there are other ways that children can socialize in different groups and extracurricular activities, but I feel like it's not fair that we have to take our children out of school in order for them to be safe. We deserve to be in these spaces just as much as anyone else, and we deserve to not have the anxiety behind not knowing what is really happening to our children, or having to put cameras in our children's hair in order to hear abuse is happening. I see so many stories of, you know, sisters who are single moms who, you know, have children that they suspect are being abused in school. They put cameras in, they catch these people on camera, and they deny it to the dirt, even though she has, you know, full blown evidence of the atrocities that, you know, whether your child is a special needs child or, you know, in regular classes, I feel like it should never go to the point where we need to put cameras on our children in order for us to make sure that they are being treated well. So I think there is just a huge overhaul that needs to happen in the matriarch space, where women are understanding, if we're going to fight for femininity and feminine rights, we need to fight for those rights for our children and stop looking at each other as if we are so much different, because we are all raising our children here, and we are the only ones who are sitting in this space where our children cannot go anywhere. And it's not good for their mental health, it's not good for their physical health or their emotional health. And to be isolated so much like that is just not, you know, all around is it's not fair for our children. So as I stated before, I have a lot of kind of subtopics that I will be going into when it comes to this toxic femininity and toxic girlhood topic, because I feel like that's where things need to begin. It needs to begin when our children are small, understanding that there is a system, you know, there is a switch that goes on and off that we have to be able to recognize in order to keep ourselves safe. As much as we want to be human and as much as we want to be free and be able to roam and do whatever it is that we would please and being kind to people, our world was not created that way, and not everyone is upholding that. So I think that, you know, for Black girls specifically, just seeing the disparities that we have with our girls, and just seeing so much of the exploitation happening to them online, and, you know, not really getting them to understand that they are targets in a lot of these spaces is definitely disheartening, and there needs to be more education over the protection of the Black girl. So I hope anyone who's here on my channel will stay tuned for this series, because I definitely have a lot that I want to unfold here. Like I said, I am a girl mom. You know, I am, you know, a part of the diaspora, whether you want to call me, you know, a Black person, an African American. I do not care about, you know, all of these labels. I know who I am within the diaspora, and I am proud of who I am. I love myself. I, you know, teach my daughter self-love, and we live within that truth. And I feel like this is a topic that definitely needs more attention, and I am definitely here for it. So if you have any comments or any kind of collaborations, any sisters here online who would like to discuss this topic within the diaspora, I am more than welcome to, kind of discuss it back and forth, and how it feels being a Black mom, and how it feels being a girl mom, and dealing with these issues. Because as I stated, I'm a single mom. I deal with a lot of issues on the daily, dealing with, you know, keeping my child safe, getting her to understand who she is, to love who she is, and girl specific issues when it comes to girl friendships is definitely something that I am very keen to. So if you have any collaborations, or you have any, comments, please drop them below. I am definitely going to be slowly kind of walking through this topic, because there is a whole lot that I have on my heart when it comes to the Black girls experience and the unfairness, and how we really need to pay more attention to our own. I appreciate my viewers, my new subscribers. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more DIYs, recipes, and reviews. And again, thank you so much for watching.